This is Herb Haddon for the Continuing Church of God. I'm a product of many influences. Today I'm going to talk about two of those influences: my physical father and my spiritual father. God has set us an example, and I'm going to try to show you how my dad, perhaps unknown to him, was somewhat an example like our Father in heaven. I'm going to tell some stories about my father, my dad. So just sit back and listen, and hopefully I can tie it all together at the end and we can make some sense of this. My father, he died in the early 90s at 63 years old. He was a good man. He was a good example for me and for all those who knew him. He wore many hats. He had many duties. And as such, he had many names. God has over 900 names that he uses to describe himself. Here's but a few of the names that God uses with an intended comparison to my dad, very loose comparison. Let's start with he in whom I trust. My dad wouldn't let anything happen to me or my siblings that would hurt me in any way, and in him I had trust. He that builds all things. God designs boats. Did you know that? Genesis 6:14, God said to Noah, "Make thee an ark of gopher wood. Room shall you make in the ark, and pitch it within and without with pitch." In the 15th verse, "And this shall be the fashion which you shall make of it. The length of the ark shall be 300 cubits, the breadth of it 50 cubits, and the height 30 cubits. A window shall you make in the ark, and in a cubit shall you finish it above, and a door of the ark you shall set in the side thereof. With lower, second, and third stories shall you make of it." Dad designed boats. In Dad 6:14, he said, "Make yourself a boat of plywood. Overlay that plywood with fiberglass. The length of it shall be 27 feet, and the breadth of it shall be 8 feet. In one level shall you make it, and it shall be powered by as many horsepower as you can fit in the stern. He that is able to keep you from falling." That was my dad. "He that is mighty, he that ought to be feared, the Lord that smites." Several times in my growing up years, I've had to fear the mighty hand of my dad for things I had done to deserve his correction. And yes, I know all about he that smiteth. Proverbs 13:24, "He that spares his rod hates his son, but he that loves him chastens him betimes." Sometimes Dad loved me a lot. "He that sees me," you've heard the saying, eyes in the back of his head. I could never pull the wool over Dad's eyes. Dad knew what I was doing and thinking before I knew what I was doing or thinking. "He which is perfect in knowledge." I'm not saying that Dad was perfect in knowledge, but in my mind, he sure seemed it. "Fortress, shelter, refuge, my defense, my deliverer." I was about 5 years old. My dad and older brother were in the front seat of a 36 Chev. I was curled up in the back seat on the verge of falling asleep. What could have been the final sleep of this life here on earth? My dad shook me awake saying he could smell exhaust fumes. There was a hole in the car exhaust and a hole in the floor right below where I was falling asleep. Stopping the car, he got me outside, and in the fresh air, he walked me around until I came back to my senses. My dad delivered me from the arms of death at that moment. He was my deliverer. My friend, Proverbs 13:20, "He that walks with wise men shall be wise." My help, my trust from my youth. Our potter. Dad was usually trying to teach. I was usually trying not to listen. Proverbs 13:1, "A wise son hears his father's instruction." There's a saying that the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. I can only hope that I don't fall too far from my dad's tree. Rabbi, teacher. As his chosen profession, Dad was a teacher. As such, he was a much respected man, and he didn't always see that respect. Proverbs 22:1, a good name is rather to be chosen than great riches, and loving favor rather than silver and gold. One of his former students, an adult at this time, this is many years after he'd been taught, came up to him and addressed him as Mr. Haddon. Although this guy was well beyond the age of a student, had his family of his own, could have called him by his first name. My dad got a small tear in his eye, and he noticed that I had noticed it. And he took me aside and he said, all those years, and I get the respect like this, he said, it's worth it. Along the same vein, one of my brothers recently commented to me that we, as his sons, are living in his shadow and reaping the benefits of the respect others had for him. Another name, refuge in times of trouble. Spirit of counsel and might. Dad would always be there when I needed him. On my first trip across Canada, my car broke down in Regina, Saskatchewan. I called Dad, and he talked me through changing the timing chain on the car until I got back on the road. And he also sent me some money so I could stay at a hotel, and I don't think I ever paid him back. Who forgives all your iniquities. I did a lot of things wrong growing up. My dad was usually there to teach and correct me, and quick to forgive me for my shortcomings. Another interesting trait my dad had, is he despised arrogance and pride. This one particular time, my dad and his brother were working in a garage on a car when a former student of his came in, and a man at this time, and following this guy were several of what Dad called his entourage. You see, this was a proud and an arrogant man, and Dad didn't really care for the guy. This guy was a welder by profession. Again, he was taught by Dad. And he came up to Dad and he asked him, he said, I have a freezing problem with my oxyacetylene tanks, and Dad didn't even lift his head out of the engine where he was working. How many oxygen tanks do you have hooked up? The guy said 4. And without so much as lifting his head, Dad said, matter-of-factly, take 2 tanks off. That'll solve your problem. Well, the guy made the adjustments and it worked. And after he left, the guy felt a little deflated, of course. Dad's brother looked over at Dad and said, how did you know such an obscure solution for that particular problem? Dad stood up and he wiped his hands on a rag and he said, funny thing, I just read that yesterday in a magazine. God hates pride and arrogance too. In Proverbs 6:16 and 17, I'll abbreviate it. 6 things doth the Lord hate, yea, 7 are an abomination unto him. A proud look. When could I call on help from Dad? Anytime. You know, Dad had 3 other names as well, and I've used a couple of them. Father. As a father, he gave me life. He put a roof over my head. Food, clothes, bed, and a loving family. A formal education. Dad. As a dad, he gave me instructions in life. He taught me right from wrong. He taught me how to best pick my friends. He taught me morals, modesty, character. He taught me the meaning of no and the meaning of yes. He taught me that a true gift hurts just a little bit to give it. But there's a third level to this. The relationship I had with my father, my dad. Daddy. This is where a father, a son, and a daughter will bond on a level that's hard to explain. It doesn't happen very often, or at least as often as a father would like it to happen. This is reserved for special times when he or she has complete and total trust in their father. Times like, watch this, Daddy. Carry me, Daddy. Daddy, why? Or Daddy, is everything going to be all right? Daddy, help me. Maybe you can draw some comparisons with your father, your dad, your daddy. I'd like to tell you a story I remember about my dad, perhaps the earliest memory I have of my dad. I was about 3 years old. I was on the front seat of the car. Dad was driving, and apparently I was very tired because my head was nodding off and I just couldn't sit up straight, and I was fighting it, of course. Dad just gently took my head and he pulled me down to his lap. He said, "Lay down, son." And as I fell asleep, looking through the spokes of the steering wheel, I felt complete and total trust for this man, my father, my daddy. I remember one time we were cruising across the bay in Dad's boat, a cabin cruiser he'd built. He was going just fast enough to bring the boat up on a plane, just so it would slide along nicely through the water. And a skiff, that's a small boat, had a big motor on it, pulled up beside us. And the guy in the skiff, he looked over at Dad and he caught Dad's eye and he kind of grinned and he cranked on the throttle and he started skipping away. Well, I was with my siblings and my mom. We were all in the boat together, but I was closest to Dad. And Dad, he leaned over to me and he said, "Watch this." And he grabbed the throttle and he pushed it forward. And the 4 barrels kicked in on that 429 Cobra Jet Racing motor, and we picked ourselves out of the water and flew by him like he was standing still. And the guy in the other boat, his jaw hit the floorboards. That's the last I saw of him. That was a daddy moment. You see, my brothers and sisters were around me, and my mom was there, but Dad shared this little thing with me, this daddy moment. Watch this. Fast forward to March 1992. My dad is dying in the hospital. He's surrounded by my mother and my brothers and sisters. And I was leaving for the night, and I tried to get his attention. And, well, I was at the foot of the bed, and as I was leaving, I just pinched his toe. Well, Dad, through my brothers and sisters, looked up, and our eyes caught. I just wanted to say goodnight. Our eyes met. There were tears in mine. And the look, he didn't say anything, but the look said, "It's going to be all right, son." Dad died that night. It was the last I saw him alive. That was my last daddy moment. Matthew 3:16 and 17. This is after Christ was baptized. "And lo, the heavens were opened unto him, and he saw the Spirit of God descending like a dove and lighting upon him. And a voice from heaven saying, This is my beloved Son, whom I am well pleased." That, my friends, was a daddy moment. There's one name for God our Father I've purposely left out. It's found in 3 places. The first one, Mark 14:36, and he, this is Christ, just before he was to die, says, "Abba, Father, all things are possible unto you. Take away this cup from me. Nevertheless, not what I will, but what you will." Here's God the Father and the Word, now Christ, who inhabit eternity. Picture what's happening. A son is crying to his father to help him. A son who knows he's to experience something totally new, to taste death, a horrible death. Crying out to his father for help, knowing that he had to travel this path alone. It's been said that children shouldn't die before their parents. This father was about to lose his son, albeit for a short time. But don't tell me it wasn't hard. Paul says in Romans 8:15, "You have not received the spirit of bondage, again to fear, but you've received the spirit of adoption, whereby we cry, Abba, Father." Paul also says in Galatians 4:6, "And because you are sons, God has sent forth the Spirit of His Son unto your hearts, crying, Abba, Father." We are sons of God the Father. When can we call on God the Father for help? Anytime. Definition of Abba: a term expressing warm affection and confidence. It's not stated, but it's implied. The word could be translated Daddy. God, our Father, has given us the privilege to call out to Him in times of trouble. We're at the end of our rope. We've tied a knot and we're holding on tight. The end is in sight, but we can't get there. When we have no more to give, when we're lost and we can't find our way out, we can call out, Abba, Father, Daddy, help. His answer might be yes. His answer might be no. His answer might be not now. Or his answer might be, lay down here, son. Or it might be, watch this, son. Or maybe his answer is going to be, it's going to be all right, son. A daddy moment. This is Herb Haddon for the Continuing Church of God.